What's up, my dudes and dudettes? This is Byron here, and welcome to another video. Now, I don't know if you guys are confused with the title or not. There's a lot that I'm going to explain in the video, so just watch this video at your own pace. And to the Six Flags people, Kings Island people, and others, you should also take notes on this, especially for the near future and when the Six Flags Entertainment Corporation is at a better financial standard. So, yeah. So what we're going to discuss today is the fact that, not just the fact that I have enjoyed Nickelodeon from when I was a kid, but why I think that Nickelodeon should come back in a lot of ways. And there are some good reasons why, and how I'm going to tell you regarding how this will make common sense. So for those of you that don't know, there was indeed a time when this world had Paramount parks. Now, those Paramount parks were not built from the ground as the Paramount parks, but they were just retrofitted, and I'll tell you why. So basically, theme parks like Kings Island, Carowinds, Kings Dominion, California's Great America, and Canada's Wonderland opened under the Taft Broadcasting Company ownership. And it was something that a lot of people loved, not just the IP, but regarding how original that the park was in a lot of ways. And since Taft had this IP with like a bunch of Hanna-Barbera characters, they were able to bring those characters into parks, and people loved them, both kids and adults alike. And while those parks were beloved, those parks had gone through a lot of changes, especially California's Great America, which apparently when it first opened, it wasn't under the Taft Broadcasting Company. It was under what they called Marriott's Great America. It was built in both California and Chicago, Illinois. And as for the one in California, they did have one specific IP, which were the Looney Tunes characters. A lot of people back then were mostly familiar with not only Hanna-Barbera, but also the Looney Tunes characters. So it was a different time being. And it was basically like that for years, and people still look back and adore them for how they were back in the day, no matter which park it is. And then in late 1992, every single park that was owned under the Coco ownership was bought out by this studio company that we know and love called Paramount. Now, Paramount was not under Viacom. It was under the Gulf Western ownership. And it was basically something that people were okay with at first. But then as time progressed, Paramount started fully taking over the park in a lot of ways. They no longer give a lot of charm that they once had in the old days, but still kept some. It was just a mixed use of its legacy while still becoming a studio park. And they were zapping every single IP that they have into the parks and into the areas, which I could definitely see why a lot of people were not pleased about it. And some rights were even built cheaply. And plus, regarding the employees, in the later years, not a lot of them were paid enough. And not to mention, at Kings Island, when Son of Beast was built, it was built with cheap material, and they got sued over the fact that some construction had failed, and then they had to rebuild it. And then as time progressed, even with those incidents, it turned out that the Son of Beast was a failure. So yeah, Paramount was indeed in charge of building the original Son of Beast. Not the original Beast, but the original Son of Beast. That did not go well in a lot of ways. And no, Son of Beast was not a Paramount IP. It was Kings Island's own IP. It was just built differently. I mean, Paramount was still beloved for what it was, especially for tourists, but when it comes to the cleanliness, it was definitely not meeting its expectations. And especially with those parks opening seasonally and not year-round, while some of those parks around the world are open seasonally. But when it comes to Paramount, you gotta understand, it's not in the South where, And regarding the fact that Paramount had brought in some rides and coasters, replacing some of the beloved rides and attractions, and nobody was happy to see those things go. And I could definitely see why, even though that some had maintenance issues along the way, and not everything met its expectations. And not to mention, when Paramount decided to bring back Winterfest in 2005, they were oh, we don't feel like we have time to build this, that. They were not putting a lot of effort into the holiday transitions as what Six Flags is doing now. It made it disappointing by not adding a lot of offerings involved or expanding them in any way, but they also charged pass holders $25 to go to Winterfest and not giving them admission to go there for free, which is weird. It's I hate to say this, but when you have an ownership that's basically run by a studio company all the way from Hollywood and the West Coast, then Hollywood is known for cash grabbing and a lot of greediness, especially when it comes to corporate. But prior to the Cedar Fair acquisition, and even throughout the transitions from Paramount to Cedar Fair, they still had a good variety involved while they lasted. Nickelodeon, that was one of my favorites, especially Nickelodeon Universe. In fact, the Nickelodeon Universe area was what introduced me to theme parks in the first place, and even theme park lands. You also had Crocodile Dundee, Star Trek coaster over at Carowinds, the coasters that were themed to Top Gun, etc., etc. But not every single thing that they had involved, but you know what I mean when I say that. And then as time progressed with the Cedar Fair acquisition, they had to get rid of the Paramount theme because, it's You know, it's for legal reasons, copyright reasons. And unfortunately, they were like, oh, you know what? We're going to go ahead and get rid of Nickelodeon for the Peanuts because of royalty costs. And we will talk a bit more about that here in just a bit. Even though a lot of people, especially the older fans of Kings Island, have enjoyed the Peanuts for who they are and how they've been the mascot of the parks, especially when it comes to the rich history with them starting at Knott's Berry Farm. So you gotta look at it this way. When it comes to having intellectual properties in the parks, you gotta have the ones that are popular and even the ones that people know and love. Like for example, Kings Island and even Kings Dominion and several other parks had Hanna-Barbera. And Six Flags did have that, and Universal had it, but like as separate attractions. But when it comes to theme parks like Kings Island and Kings Dominion, the Hanna-Barbera areas that they once had were something that everybody enjoyed. And when Nickelodeon came along, they were like, oh, you know, let's just go ahead and have it like half and half. Because at that time, when it comes to the 90s and the 2000s, it was a different time being because every kid and adult was into Hanna-Barbera, while kids were just into Nickelodeon. And that was the average range of the targeted audience when it comes to having those two separate IPs. And when you take one out in favor of a different one, I'm not saying that it does not interest anybody, and I'm sure it has driven some away, but it doesn't hit the same for older generations. I mean, when we had Nickelodeon Universe, I was definitely fine with it. Sure, not everybody is into like what future generations are into because times are different, because when you get older, you're not typically into those cartoons and such, especially when it comes to it being like at a targeted audience in the average range when it comes to nostalgia. But hear me on this. Anybody can tune into it no matter how old they are. Anybody, regardless of their age, can tune into any IP if they want. And I could see where they're coming from because that was the case back then and even in today's standards, because at multiple theme parks, the IPs are placed into different companies. Like when you have Disney, you strictly have Disney properties. Universal contains multiple things, not just their own properties, but the rights they have from other things like Shrek and Harry Potter and even Terminator at one point. SeaWorld and Busch Gardens have the Sesame Street properties. Paramount has Nickelodeon and Star Trek. Cedar Fair has the Peanuts properties. And even Six Flags has the Looney Tunes and DC Comics properties. And even some of the Hanna-Barbera stuff at one time. So basically, this is what it was back in the day. And nowadays, it's just a bit different where you're like, oh, I don't know what to say more, because apparently Six Flags had merged with Cedar Fair. So it definitely gives it a weird look in today's standards. And speaking of mergers, when everybody hears the word merger, they think of acquisition. Well, to be honest, there's a difference between merging with a company and acquiring a company or buying something out. Now hear me on this. When it comes to merger, I want y'all to hear me on this. When it comes to having a merger, you're just when it comes to merging with the company, you're basically like, now when it comes to a merger, it's just one company combining another company like together, and they continue to thrive, but in one single company, which that can create a lot of changes. And it does not fully affect what you have. It'll just add in more things instead of like replacing something, unless you have like an expiration date to the point where you want to get rid of something. That's different. As for the acquisition, on the other hand, you're just basically buying out something. Like you're not combining something to one thing. You're just trashing the company out for a different one. And that's where they make a lot of changes when it comes to that buyout, especially when it comes to like properties and just improving things here and there. Now, sure, there are changes involved when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, but they thrive differently compared to one another. And this is also the same case when it comes to Paramount preparing the bid to buy Warner Bros, which I'm not sure if it's going to go through, but at least it's not a merger. And yes, there are positive and negative effects when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, but not every single one of them is bad. But to be honest, it depends on the reputation and the performance of each company, whether it's corporate or not. Now, here's the thing about the aftermath of the acquisition of the Paramount parks, aside from Cedar Fair. After Paramount was bought out by Cedar Fair, the attractions in the Paramount industry was not fully the same. Well, sure, you had the Nickelodeon Hotel and you had other parks catering the Nickelodeon IP, like Dreamworld and even Universal when they had Jimmy Neutron's Nick to Blast as that attraction. It was just a different time being. Almost every single Paramount attraction, including Star Trek, those were slowly getting phased out for legal reasons, financial reasons, you name it, the list goes on. And the problem with this situation is that both Paramount and Nickelodeon tried opening multiple parks in the US and even outside the US. And while some of them have worked, they have fully not. And get this, Paramount actually offered Cedar Fair to continue catering those IPs since they previously owned the parks, which were at the royalty costs like $500,000, which was like 6%, and unfortunately still like that today. And they offered the fees. It's not just like a couple of IPs, it's like a ton, like more than that. So then Cedar Fair decided to decline it because of how expensive that those IPs are, which is unfortunate. But to be honest, some of those IPs are very popular. And that also explains why that some of the Warner Bros IPs are also expensive as well, especially when it comes to this company called Turner that caters the Hanna-Barbera properties, which apparently sucks. And I can definitely see why that some companies like to get things that are cheaper. Even though they've gotten expensive rides and attractions over the years, I will assure to you that Cedar Fair and Six Flags have been known for their cost-cutting measures, and for a lot of good reasons, especially when it comes to the economy crisis that happened in 2008. And I mean, of course, you got the Nickelodeon Universe theme park that opened in Bloomington, Minnesota, that opened in 2008, located inside Mall of America. That's still open today. And you also have another Nickelodeon Universe theme park located at American Dream, and that opened in 2019. And that is also located in New Jersey. But other than that, Paramount did try to convert one of the resorts into the Paramount Resort over the UK or something like that. And now there's a Paramount theme park that is about to open somewhere in Asia. And I'm not sure if that's gonna fully go through because there have not been a lot of updates on that. And you also have Nickelodeon expanding its theme parks internationally and not in the US like it used to, like adding them as trusted IPs in Germany, the UK, Turkey, Spain, and a few other countries that I can't even think of. And they are well modernized, which leads to this question. Why can't the US bring the Nickelodeon IPs into the parks even if they would not be full-on Paramount or Nickelodeon parks? I definitely get that it's because of the royalty costs, and I literally made the predictions on X regarding why and how I think that those things should come in soon and to take it into financial consideration. But there's this one guy, he literally commented on one of my posts about it saying that, oh, the outrageous royalty costs will thankfully prevent them from recurring because Paramount have raped the parks. Like, to be honest, I can see where he's coming from regarding that concern, especially from the days of Paramount parks. But we're talking about IPs here, not the ownership. Like, first off, I am not predicting my home park to become a studio park it once was. Like, there's no way it's gonna happen again. And also, if they were to bring in IPs, I mean, bring in a few IPs, it's just different. And also saying that, oh, Paramount raped the parks, I'm sorry, but that is not something I would phrase when it comes to that situation. But I do agree with the fact that Paramount was not like the trustworthy ownership when it comes to the parks, especially how they did it differently by retrofitting them instead of like building from the ground. So yeah, I mean like that and the financial standards and especially the controversies behind Nickelodeon, which yeah, we don't talk about that. And when it comes to everybody's perspective on Nickelodeon, not everybody, but a lot of people's perspective, honestly, I don't know what to tell you. But as a person that grew up enjoying Nickelodeon for what it was at that time in the theme park industry, this whole Paramount thing has been cursed ever since. And I'm not sure how we're gonna break the curse, but I don't know. Now, as of the present, Six Flags is currently under a very serious financial situation, which is basically why the IPs are not going to be changed anytime soon, especially when it comes to the existing IPs and the IPs that they could buy if they are willing to do so, especially with the $5.5 million in debt that they have, or is it 5.5 billion or 5.5 million? I don't know. But like, this is what they're facing currently. And a lot of people predict the fact that even after this company merger that just closed last year, they're not going to get back on track to a better financial standard until possibly 2028 at the latest. What's really cool is that Six Flags still has the Warner Bros IPs, like Looney Tunes and DC Comics, and they do have the Peanuts. And yes, like I said before, they did renew the Peanuts IP, which I'm not too happy about, but it is what it is. Because, you know, I still enjoy the Peanuts, but I'm not always into it 24/7 because, you know, I'm a multiple interests type of guy. And sure, Six Flags is doing their best to bring in like multiple rides and attractions into their parks year after year, but this whole investment is not what we're entirely expecting. But unfortunately, it is what it is when it comes to that. But here's the thing when it comes to IPs. Fright Fest is now catering IPs, kind of like what Universal has when it comes to IPs, like The Conjuring, Saw, and Trick or Treat. In fact, Warner Bros. Had just started bringing in the Conjuring franchise to the legacy Cedar Fair parks, which is really cool to be honest. And to be honest, some parks that were previously under the Paramount ownership did have some IPs when it comes to Fear Fest. And seeing something like that again is very cool, despite the fact that the attraction itself, as well as other mazes, are now upcharge attractions, which is something that not everybody is into, but a lot of people are into that. And it's it's like if they were to bring in like other IPs, they can do it whenever they want. And I still miss the fact that they had like Scooby-Doo at the Six Flags parks, but when they started getting rid of Scooby-Doo slowly, that was like, I don't even know, man. It has not been the same ever since they left. But despite the royalty costs, who knows? Because Six Flags has had a good relationship with Warner Brothers. And whether if the Warner Brothers get bought out by Paramount or not, I don't really care what people say about it. But if this was the case, well, no, that does not mean that, oh, they're gonna have access to those IPs when you have Six Flags owning some Warner Brothers stuff, but they're not entirely Warner Brothers parks. What really drives me insane is that people say, oh, they're not gonna bring in Nickelodeon or bring Nickelodeon back because Paramount owns those IPs. Well, yes, it's true, we know that. But when you say stuff like that, it's like you're saying that, oh, Six Flags is not gonna bring in Looney Tunes or DC Comics because Warner Brothers own those things, which, yes, those are true. And hell, outside those parks, you have like multiple parks that cater to Nickelodeon and Star Trek IPs, so why are you just going to I don't even know, to be honest. It's like people should use common sense when it comes to this. And not to mention, despite Six Flags being similar to the Paramount parks, where they have not been as caring about the parks themselves for years, and even now, and even long before the merger, Six Flags did cater some IPs before, other than, you know, SpongeBob 4D, but that's different. They catered several IPs, like Tony Hawk, Evel Knievel, The Wiggles, and even Thomas Friends. Well, sure, they were not owned by Warner Brothers, but they did have those IPs for a bit, and they were going along with what they had. Right until they decided to terminate them, probably because of how expensive they are. But now looking back, it's like, why can't they do the same thing right now? Well, sure, financially, of course, but when they get back into the better financial standards, I'm like, why the hell can't they do that in the future, despite the high royalty costs? Well, I guess corporate doesn't really care, do they? Not even Paramount itself. So, I just don't even know what else to say about it. So if you can, please hear me on this. Since the merged company is run by most of the Cedar Fair executives, even though they have a couple of Six Flags executives that are in the merged company, and when they get to a better financial situation, then maybe they should take bringing in IPs into consideration, not just splitting like every single Looney Tunes and DC Comics area and every single park, especially when it comes to Six Flags selling some of its parks. Like for example, Six Flags America is getting ready to close this year. California's Great America is about to close in the next couple of years. It's going to be closing by the end of 2027 at least. And several other parks like Frontier City, Darien Lake, Six Flags Great Escape, Michigan's Adventure, Six Flags St. Louis, Worlds of Fun, Valley Fair, and several Hurricane Harbor water parks and Six Flags White Water are at a potential risk to either permanently close or to be sold to a different developer. And here's the thing when it comes to this. If Six Flags sells Valley Fair, even though it's in the same state as the Nickelodeon Universe theme park, that would create less confusion when it comes to the Six Flags parks not being in the same city or state. It's like, you get where I'm coming from? But despite the finances, I don't know. It's just my random guess. I'm not right about everything. And if they were to slowly phase out the Peanuts, the only theme park that should exclusively keep the Peanuts is Knott's Berry Farm due to its rich history. So think about it. Well, sure, the Peanuts are more popular than Looney Tunes by standards. And no, Ketchup Entertainment is not buying out Looney Tunes. It's only distributing a couple of its movies, and that's it. Not to mention, I don't mind the Looney Tunes and DC Comics characters roaming around the parks instead of getting their own attractions. But like, if they were to put in like some Paramount IPs and to do it at the right time, I said this before, but if they were to plan it now and like maybe start doing it in like, what, maybe 2028 or 2031 at the latest, then I would highly suggest setting up a specific budget and to do it without putting yourself at a higher risk. Because I'm sure that there's people out there that still enjoy Nickelodeon and Star Trek to this day, even though it's not fully the same. And get this, there are not only Nick kids nowadays, but also Nick adults that still enjoy Nickelodeon despite its reputation.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
And don't get me wrong, I don't mind seeing the properties like Looney Tunes and DC Comics. I don't really see them fully retheming every single Peanuts area into the Looney Tunes area and to have every single Action Zone or Thrill Zone area themed into DC Comics. I'm sure they would be a lot more expensive, and if they would do that, it would be like, you know, I would just rather have them like meet and greets because for one, it's a merged company. It's like you're not really buying them out. And two, make it enjoyable for everybody. And last but not least, some of y'all may have seen my predictions, but I would like to give out my predictions for what one of the theme parks could do, specifically Kings Island, to figure out how to bring back Nickelodeon in a lot of ways. Now, like I said, I did talk about it before, but I just want to be specific about it. Now, currently, they are getting rid of Boo Blasters in favor of Phantom Theater Opening Nightmare, which I think is going to be great. And regarding Phantom Theater, it is Kings Island's original ride and IP. Even though it's inspired by Disney's Haunted Mansion, Phantom Theater was not only beloved by its fans, but it's still an original IP no matter what, which is why they're easily bringing it back And that's very cool when it comes to that. So regarding the whole Snoopy area, both Planet and Camp, it would be really cool to see Nickelodeon being fully themed into the modernized Nickelodeon universe. For not only myself, but also for people that grew up with Nick and for future generations to see what it was like having that IP in the park that is a non-Paramount park, even if it's like an ex-Paramount park. So when it comes to changes, nobody wants to only see every single ride getting rethemed as such, but what we want to see are new rides being placed in the parks. For example, even though the Dressler is based in Europe, so I don't know if that would be the case because of the tariffs, but if they were to add like any Dressler ride in that area, I would love to see the Rock Bottom Plunge, which would be a clone to the Dressler era fighter coaster, take it over the space of Woodstock's Airwheel. Now, I'm not sure if that would be the case because of like how much space it is, the layout, because honestly, we're not sure how it's gonna fit well within that. But I think that would be really cool for like teens and adults to get on the ride and enjoy it. And that would be themed to SpongeBob, which SpongeBob would not only get another of his own ride, but also his own coaster in the park. And as for the Shell Shock, which is a Dressler Skyfly, I would view it being placed where Peanuts 500 is at. Because let's be real, that ride is kind of old. So I wouldn't be surprised if they remove that because, you know, it's due to its age, man. Even though it's still good for kids, honestly, I don't know how much longer it'll last. And guess what? Nickelodeon had acquired Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they're already kind of popular on Nickelodeon, so duh. And for kids and families to enjoy themselves, I wouldn't mind seeing the Paw Patrol Adventure Tour, which is that car ride, being placed where the helicopter monorail, aka Woodstock Whirlybirds, but strictly where its loading station is at. Now, the difference for that ride is that it should be a smaller type of ride. Because, for instance, the one in Germany is a bit larger, but if you take it into the US and just bring it into the loading station, that would be cool, because apparently regarding the helicopter monorail, like, I don't know how long that's gonna last. I don't mind seeing it go away anytime soon, because that ride is just kind of especially with it being a hot box, so no. Also, some other fly rides, including the hot air balloon ride, based off of Dora Explorer, like maybe Boots Balloon Race, and place that into the space where the Peanuts Road Rally is at. And also a teacup ride, themed to the Fairly Odd Parents, called the Fairy World Spin. I would imagine that being placed where the snow cone stands at. And as for other rides and attractions, I don't mind seeing the Great Pumpkin Coaster being turned into Hey Arnold's Taxi Chase. Charlie Brown's Wind Up should be turned into a modernized swing set for both kids and adults called the Nick Jr. Swings. I honestly don't mind seeing Joko's Dodgem School turning back into Jimmy Neutron's Atom Smasher, but putting a little more effort into it. Snoopy versus Red Baron, I would love to see that being turned back into Blue's Skidoo, but having a theme to Blue's Clues and You, which is a reboot. I would love to see Character Carousel being turned back into the Nick O Round, you know, where they had the characters on top of the carousel, but not specifically having the Nick Jr. characters, but rather the main Nickelodeon characters that we know and love. I personally do not mind seeing Sally's Seaplane being converted into Sky's High Flyer, themed to Sky from Paw Patrol. Snoopy Space Buggies, I don't mind seeing it themed to Diego's Rescue Rider, which it actually existed at one point. I don't know if it does anymore. I don't mind seeing the Kite Eating Tree turning back into Plankton's Plunge. And if they were to convert Franklin's Flyers into anything Nickelodeon related, I would love it to be converted into SpongeBob's Jellyfish Jam, by having those flying eagles or flying scooters convert to the flying jellyfish type of eagles, or scooters, you know what I mean. As for Linus Launcher, I would like to see it being turned into SpongeBob Fly Pants. In fact, Dreamworld actually had that ride themed to SpongeBob at one point. As for Surf Dog, I would love to see it being transformed back into Avatar The Last Airbender. That one was the #1 favorite in that area, and I think they should also add like theming elements to it. And as for Snoopy's Junction, they should definitely turn that back into La Aventura de Azul, but upgrading the train tracks and the train to make it more enjoyable, you know, Azul. And as for the new rides and attractions in the Camp Snoopy area, they should convert Snoopy's Soapbox Racers into the Coca-Cola Derby Streak. I mean, hey, you don't have to use the Nickelodeon IP for it, so that would be cool. Camp Nick Run and Play, based off of a short-lived miniseries, Camp Nick. And they should convert Pigpen's Mess Hall into the Camp Nick Cookout. That would be really cool, honestly. And as for eateries and such, they should keep the Blue Ice Cream and Tom and Chi that replaced Chick-fil-A, as well as Fisher Homes, but not having anything related to the peanuts surrounding it. I think that one of the restaurants that is currently Planet Snoopy Grill, they should tear it down and rebuild it as the Krusty Krab, as if you're walking into a real-life Krusty Krab with a few interactions involved, which that would be really cool. And it would be like a dine-in type of place instead of just sitting outside. You can all sit indoors, which I think it would give them the best opportunity to have that. And I think they should also bring in the slime fountain where the Snoopy statue is, but with the Nickelodeon Universe logo. That would be really cool. And having like multiple signs and such with Nickelodeon characters involved, like kind of like what they had back in the day. And I would also love it if they convert the Snoopy Boutique back into the Nickelodeon store, but selling Nickelodeon related merchandise, including the new shows like Paw Patrol and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, while selling merchandise related to SpongeBob and Dora, but 10 times better. As for the Peanuts showplace, they should convert it into the indoor Nickelodeon theater, hosting slime shows and such. And as for other shows, like at the International Street Bandstand, they should bring in Nicktoons Let's Party, featuring the Plankton Puppet, and multiple mascots of Nickelodeon characters would be modernized, which apparently they are, and I would love to see them in the parks again and just seeing them better than what they used to be. And as for other events, I think they should also bring in the Nick Street Parade, where they would just run from Coney Mall to like the Nickelodeon Universe area. Like, that would be really cool, to be quite honest with you. And if they were to add something for adults, they should add the Nick at Night bar inside the Miami River Brew House, which would be kind of disjointed, but you know what I mean. And finally, as for the log ride, I think they should just completely ditch the cartoon IP and bring in some original theming, like calling it the Miami River Log Flume. So yeah, I think Kings Island would be a start-off because it's in Ohio. And the reason I'm bringing up Ohio is that Ohio was where Nickelodeon started. Like, that was where it was founded. Even if it was not founded in the same city, it was still founded in the same state. So that kind of connects. And I think they should also add like the modern Star Trek coaster and placing it to where Flight of Fear currently is, like tearing it down in the next several years and just building it. And they should do the same thing at Carowinds, where its original coaster was. They should definitely build it there, replacing Nighthawk as well as Ripcord and Kitty Hawk. Like, that would be really cool to see. And I think some parks like Kings Dominion, Carowinds, and even Six Flags New England should bring in the Nickelodeon areas, replacing Planet Snoopy, Camp Snoopy, and even Kidsopolis, which apparently nobody really knows what Kidsopolis is. And like I said, if they were to change IPs, I don't expect it to happen anytime soon, but rather I would definitely see that happening in the next several years if they can make like a budget for it, and if they take this into consideration, because again, that would be really cool to see. I would apparently like to see it happening between 2028 and 2031 at least, or just later, especially with Nickelodeon's time capsule that's going to open on April 30th, 2042. So I think that would be really cool regarding that. And besides, Nickelodeon is slowly coming back by adding some of its standalone attractions, and Paramount's kind of doing the same thing, even though it's not the same. And guess what? They're bringing back the Nickelodeon Hotel next year in Florida, but it's going to be built from the ground. And despite it being expensive, which is what we bet, I think it's still going to be cool to see that. And here's the thing, when they say at least, I meant that like, oh, that's does not fully mean that they're actually going to have Peanuts for 5 full years, even though that's part of the contract. But honestly, I don't mind seeing it being in a few parks. I don't mind seeing Nick coming back or just coming to a few parks, just not every single one of them, depending on the space. Because trust me, I've done some research. And not to mention, you know what I think that Six Flags should bring in? Another screaming experience related to Friday the 13th. That would be really cool to see. So to the people that work in the Six Flags investments, as well as the Paramount investments, Nickelodeon investments, if you guys are watching this, I hope you take this into consideration and hopefully take a lot of time to basically bring it back to what they were. That would be amazing. And even if it doesn't fully come to fruition, hey, at least we tried. So yeah, that's all I have to say, guys. Thank you so much for watching this vid. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you later. Until then, this is me, Byron, signing off. Peace.